With trees, know before you grow. All credit given to Encore, the electric service providers. That's what they say. They say it because they don't want to have to trim these trees. Don't be planting big trees in tiny places. Remember, I talked about that when you go buy a tree. Know before you grow. Do your homework. That way you can avoid problems like this. Know how tall and how wide each plant, each tree, each plant that you buy will grow before you take it home. You'll avoid a lot of mistakes. Neil, I'm getting older. I can ask this now because I'm getting older. Neil, I'm getting older. I don't have all the time in the world. I want a good, fast-growing shade tree. And I say, all right, first of all, those terms are self-excluding. Can't have both. I want you to do something for me. I want you to list the other things that are important in that shade tree. And so I'll ask them, do you care how it looks? Well, yeah, I care. I don't want some ugly tree in my yard. Okay, do you care if it lives more than 10 years? Yeah, I wouldn't want to plant a tree and then have it do what this Bradford pear did in 10 or 12 years. Okay, I'll write that down. So I have fast growth, good looks, live a long time. Those are important things to you. Do you care if it has insect and disease problems? Yeah, I don't have to spray it all the time. All right, so pest resistance important to you. Fast growth, good looks, lives a long time, pest resistant. Do you care if it's adapted to our climate and our soils? In other words, not going to freeze here, not going to turn yellow like that pin oak did. Yeah, that matters. Okay, so it's adapted. So here are the 4, 5, 6 things that we've come up with. I want you now to go back into that list and rank them. You tell me which one moves the most. And they look at those. Which one are you willing to give up? And they think about those things. And they say, good gosh, the only one I'm willing to give up is the fast growth. I say, yeah, I thought that's where you would head. Those are the important things, those other things. Beauty, site adaptability, pest resistance, longevity. I'd be willing to wait an extra year or two if I could have all of those things. There's a fact you can really use. Buy a little larger tree. Maybe you don't go out to eat that one night. Maybe you invest that money. Anybody go out to eat now? Am I the only one? My wife's 75th birthday was Monday, and we ate on a parking lot with our kids 10 feet away from everybody. Had potbelly. That's a great, and she loved it. That was her first, her favorite pandemic dining out. We go there, we have a hamburger place we go, and she goes to KFC, and that's it, and it's all drive-through. So anyway, we eat out and think nothing of it. Spend a little bit more on that tree and get quality. The trees that are really good, like Shumard red oak, my favorite tree of all. I said when I was 20 years old, I would be honored to have a Shumard red oak planted at the head of my grave, and I'll still say it today. You can get one just as big in 20 years as a fast-growing tree in 15 years. I can wait that 5 years, especially if I'm there. 90% of any tree's roots are in the top foot of soil. I think this American elm kind of proves that. That was a seedling tree, probably a mistake, you think, in leaving it there. A good friend of mine owns that house, owns that tree, bought the house, bought the tree, and house is still there, tree's not there. Anyway, you always want to remember that tree roots at the surface are absolutely normal, and you need to account for that. You can't cut them off, not enough of them. You might be able to put a root barrier in to stop them from getting up into pavement, but you can't stop them when they're that close. You don't want to cover them up because they'll just grow through that too. Just remember that 90% of any tree's roots are in the top foot of soil. That's a fact that you need to stick in the back of your mind and just pull it out at a time when somebody's telling you something really boring. You pull that fact out and change the topic on them, and they'll really think you're smart. When you're buying trees, bigger is not always best. In other words, you don't have to go buy a great tall tree. You can buy a 6-foot tree and a lot of times get a 20-foot tree out of it faster than if you buy an 18-foot tall tree. You buy an 18-foot tall bald and burlap tree. See how much of the root system is lost when these are dug? Those are beautiful trees, and sometimes you need the look of a big tree, and so that's okay. But you don't get a big tree any faster going this way. So save your money, buy a smaller tree, take really good care of it. Plants and foundations can coexist. Just don't plant that American elm right up close to the house. These are small plants. They're going to get along just fine. Ground covers are not less work than lawns. Here's the way that comes to me on the radio or in my Q&A columns. I write for about 14 newspapers across the state. Neil, I am really tired of having to take care of my lawn. I want to do it the easy way. I'm just going to take the lawn out and I'll replace it with a ground cover. And here's the bad news of that. Ground covers are a lot more work than turf grass because you get to do everything by hand. You get to pull the weeds by hand. You get to do the trimming by hand. You can't take, in most cases, you can't take a lawnmower in to mow a ground cover. If you do, then you'll probably end up tearing up the ground cover. So ground covers are not less, you have to plant them by hand. I would not go into that deal thinking you're saving work. There are 3 times that ground covers are less work than lawns. Number one, you have a lot of shade, like that bed that turf grass that I showed you in my own lawn. Too much shade, can't grow grass. Then a ground cover is a good possibility, like this monkey grass on the upper level there. Number 2, if you have a really steep slope where you're going to roll down the hill, that's a good place for a ground cover, or where you'll have erosion. And number 3, if you have a long, skinny area where you just want something to give some greenery and you don't want to have to edge it and mow it and all that. But otherwise, stick with turf grass if you possibly can. You don't have to have a bed that is 50 feet long and 3 feet wide to have effective color. It doesn't have to be that big. This is my landscape. It's my peperomia. It's my desire to have color without having to plow up a big, long bed. I got lazy and it worked well. And that little peperomia plant went to the greenhouse in the winter and it came right back to its pedestal every summer for 5 or 6 years. And I started propagating it. Now I have a bunch of them. Any plant that you put on a pedestal is given hero status. And so you can use them for color programs like this and be very effective about it. Number 14, fact you can use, choose adapted annuals and plant them at the correct time. And so I'd ask of you, if we were looking nose to nose, eye to eye, what's the right time to plant marigolds? And most of you would wave your hands and say, I know, Neil, I know. And you'd tell me it would be April. April's a great time. Well, April's okay. And then in June, they all get spider mites and die. Yikes, not good. I'll tell you the best time is the middle of August. You don't get spider mites on the new transplants. You get little transplants that are just coming into bud. You don't get spider mites in the fall, and the colors are so rich, so intense. That same thing is true with zinnias. If you happen to have come here from the north, you look at zinnias and marigolds in the spring, you say, those are kind of insipid looking. Well, try them in the fall garden. They are glorious. Okay, here's another thing. Kind of goes with that turf grass thing. Neil, I'm tired of taking care of the lawn. I want it easier. Okay, Neil, I'm tired of having to replace my annual flowers twice a year. I just want to plant with perennials and I'll do it once and I'll never have to do anything again, or some variation of that. And that's hooey. That's just plain old-fashioned hooey. This is a plant called spiderwort, and it blooms 2 or 3 weeks in the spring and early summer. 2 or 3 weeks. And then you get to think of something else that will bloom the next 2 or 3 weeks and the next 2 or 3 weeks. Perennials don't bloom very long. And so it's up to you to schedule probably 20 different types of perennials for your garden so that you stagger them. You always have something coming along and blooming for you. If you don't have that, then your garden won't look very good. In fact, perennials are not very pretty when they're not blooming, and your garden may look weedy. It's a good idea to have some shrubs in a perennial garden and some annuals that do bloom for a long period of time. You have to do a lot of planning for a perennial garden. There is nothing more beautiful than a simple perennial garden that has been well designed and is maintained well. But remember, again, you have to do all that work by hand. You have to dig and divide them every 2 or 3 or 4 years, and you have to do it by hand because you can't get back in there with a rototiller to rework the soil. So perennials are not less work, they're more work, but the rewards are wonderful. Just know going in, I have some work ahead of me. This is our yard. That actually is where the fountain is. And so that's what evolves. Landscapes are works in progress. You get to a point where you have so much shade that even grass won't grow, and you can't correct for it with fertilizer. If you don't get enough sunshine, all the plant food in the world won't help. You don't get enough sunshine in your body, all the vitamins in the world aren't going to help. You need sunshine. All right, so I keep a record. This desk at which I'm sitting is where I broadcast. It's where I type my newspaper columns. I'm in this chair at this desk 7 days a week. And I keep a log of all of the questions that come into me. I've done that all of my career. I have notebooks. I'm not obsessive. I tell myself that every morning, every evening. 15,000 days I've told myself that. Not obsessive. And the most common question I am asked is some variation of, Neil, how can I get rid of this weed? And I have come to find many years ago that weeds are usually an indicator of some kind of a lawn problem. I forgot to water in the summer, the lawn grass died. I didn't fertilize properly, I mowed too high, I didn't get the grass planted right in the first place. Whatever it is, there's a failure in there somewhere, and the grass, the weed, whatever, was invited to come by. The best way to get rid of many weeds is simply to ramp up your lawn care. Take better care of the lawn, the weeds go away. I think they take pretty good care of their lawn. That Bermuda grass, that's in Richardson. Isn't that gorgeous? That's several years ago, but they don't look that good now. You want to use an all nitrogen fertilizer. Here are some critical tips that you can remember. Hope you're writing some of these things down. All nitrogen, that's the first number of the 3-number analysis. That's what Texas A&M research has shown. That's what in Ohio they recommend. In fact, they're not allowed to sell any fertilizer with phosphorus in it in the state of Ohio. All nitrogen. Up to half of that nitrogen should be in slow release form. You want to have timed release nitrogen for sustained feeding. I am not an advocate of weed and feed products. I have to sell my own ads on my radio program in my publications, and I will not accept ads. I've turned down contracts that have been proposed that were for weed and feed products. I don't think you need to do both things at the same time. As a young man, my son Brian had heard me say that so many times that he said, Dad, I've got it. I figured it out. He said, I like English peas and I like ice cream. I just don't feel compelled to eat them at the same time. I personally have no problem in using weed killers. That's what my dad did as a professional with A&M. And I certainly don't have any problem in recommending inorganic fertilizers. Plants do not discern whether a fertilizer comes out of a fertilizer plant or out of a cow.